go ahead and kick this one off then. Thank you for joining me today, fellas. Brother Ward, good to see you again. And Aaron, the founder of the new Black Panther Party, thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, no problem, no problem at all. Always willing to get the historical overview of the new Black Panther Party on the minds of the people.
Perfect, man. Well, with that being started, with us getting started, why don't you just start out with when the new Black Panther Party, or when you decided to get it going again?
Well, that's a that's an interesting fact of history. I was actually the producer for a radio talk show here in Dallas, Texas. The show was called Talk Back. It was on urban radio. Pretty much one of the first talk formats, African American talk urban talk shows here in the Dallas area. And I was doing a lot of historical individuals who had participated in history as in general. So as I became a lot more aware of my research into the FBI's counterintelligence program, which took place in 1966, I started doing research on the Black Panther Party and some of the pitfalls that they befell as an organization, as individuals within the organization. So I started doing looking around for individuals who were still alive within that organization, and that was about 1980, um, probably late '86, things of that nature. Because I didn't bring the new Black Panther Party as an organization online until about 1987, October of 1987. At that time, I think it might have been the 25th year anniversary of the Black Panther Party of Self Defense by Huey Newton, Bobby Seale. It was when I bought the new Black Panther Party into its inception around that time. So that's how I got involved in the new Black Panther Party. Was doing research on its former members and things of that nature. So I had done a number of interviews with people. Bobby Rush, who is still an alderman, or was an alderman in Chicago, and then became a member of Congress some years later. And he and I had a long conversation, and then we brought him on Talkback Liberation Radio. We had done a number of interviews with. We actually did an interview with Bobby Seale, who was a professor emeritus at his university that he's still at right now. We had talked to Kathleen Cleaver, and then we had talked to several other members of the Black Panther Party. I talked to Sister Akua, Fred Hampton's widow. Talked to her, and so I started doing all this research, and then I came to a deeper conclusion that if the FBI had not infiltrated and destroyed the Black Panther Party, that they would have been an organization that would have carried on their legacy even to this very day. With that said, I just decided that uh, it was time for the Black Panther Party to resurrect itself in Black communities, because the same things that were going on in the 1960s and the 1950s, 40s, and 30s was still happening in the 80s in the African American community. One of the biggest travesties that we didn't get a chance to get off into at that time, but which really kind of melded the ideology with me of re-resurrecting the ideology of the Black Panther Party, was a proliferation of drugs in the African American community, namely crack cocaine, which pretty much had just decimated the Black community in the 1980s and early 80s, 90s, and even to this very day is still a prolific drug in the African American community. Methamphetamine and heroin took over uh, the white suburbs and things of that nature, and then the rural areas. Methamphetamine is similar to crack in the way that it's created. With anybody could just do it. All you have to do is have the right chemicals and things of that nature. But long short is, I thought the drug industry in America had been a abysmal failure for Black people and urban communities. So one of the things that kind of launched us off. Now we had actually already been a group of brothers and sisters out in the community getting rid of drug dealers in our community at that time. And so when people find out that those are the things that we were doing, we started having problems with some African Americans because they were like, well, black people don't have jobs, black people don't have this. Why are you guys out there harassing black people who are just trying to make a living? Well, for one thing, you guys you're selling drugs and destroying, doing the work of the capitalist class by doing that. And
Yeah.
so that was one of the reasons that really kind of launched the new Black Panther Party off. We used to be called the Brothers in Black in the community without us even ever calling ourselves the Black Panther Party or the new Black Panther Party. So we did that for probably a year, year and a half, and then we ended up coming to this greater conclusion that there wasn't just drugs in the community that was still destroying the black community, but it was us not being in the boardrooms when decisions about black communities were being made in the boardrooms of Dallas, Texas, and things like that. So those were some of the other things that kind of drove us to recreate the ideological values of the Black Panther Party. And then that we found out that there was a gentleman in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. His name was he was an alderman at that time, which is something similar to a commissioner like we have here in Dallas, Texas. And so we set about with meetings with him, and he came on Talkback Liberation Radio at that time. So and then he started seeing that we all had something in common. Um, Dallas County Commissioner John Wiley Price at that time had taken on this whole thing of racism in corporate America in Dallas, Texas, and so a lot of us joined him in that fight. And by joining him in that fight, we targeted those institutions in our community that we deemed racist and who had racist overviews of African Americans at that time. We targeted the media. We targeted the ABC corporations. We targeted the NBC corporations. We targeted a number of high level media corporations, and then we targeted um, corporations here in Dallas that were central to Dallas, Texas. And when we picketed them, and we always say that picketing doesn't really work until the people on the other end of the spectrum actually feel the 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 melancholy of that protest. They can't feel it until they actually experience it with us. So that meant this: us out there in the streets picketing didn't make a difference. We had to make it even more abysmal for them on their way to work. So we began to do what is called strategic protests. The two greatest times of the day that you have the most traffic was in morning drive time and afternoon drive time. So we started protesting in that morning drive time. And between 5 and 6 a.m. in the morning, we would go out and protest till about 9 in the morning. And
Mm.
then we would hit them again probably around 2 o'clock in the afternoon till 6 in the evening. So we targeted those institutions. And so what those institutions started to get was backlash from the general public and the police department about us in the streets protesting, and traffic couldn't move. So we actually stopped the flow of traffic around a whole city to get our point across. Because, like I said, people could care less because you're out there walking across just a little lowly street. You've got to get out there and get in the face of racism if you're going to try to stop it.
Yeah.
And that's what we actually did. We got in the face of racism, and we actually brought those corporations to their knees, so much to the point that we were actually able to change at that time in the late 80s and 90s what the makeup of the news desks looked like in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. They took some of us in, had meetings with us, and asked us what did we want. We told them what we wanted. We wanted to see different people in those news desks every day on TV. We wanted to see people that looked like us. We wanted to see news stories, not just about African Americans in general, but that people who came to our community to do those news stories looked like us. And so we had protests against doing any type of interviews with anybody if they didn't send anybody out other than African Americans. I mean, you had to build a rapport with us if in order you had to be sympathetic to our cause for us to do an interview with somebody outside of the African American community at that time. And there were a lot of people who did sympathize with our struggles. A lot of uh, interviewers who were white who said, "Man, I understand why you're out here." Not it wasn't their fault that they ended up. Uh, the circumstances of their birth had nothing to do with why we were protesting their news service, but they understood that, and so they sympathized with us. There were a few people who wanted to try to build that into some international story by storming us or sticking cameras in our faces and things of that nature. So we pushed back when they did that. We wouldn't do interviews with them. We took the cameras from them. We told them, hey, you got to go home. We can't do interviews with us. We would take the cameras from these guys, and so we would tell them, you want to do an interview with us? Show up down in the African American community when we're chasing those black drug dealers out of there. That's when you show up, and we'll give you an interview then. So we ended up doing that. And one of the things that we always said that was one of the greatest tools we ever used, and it was an idea that came from the original Black Panther Party for Self Defense with Bobby and Huey, is that when they went out in the community and dealt with the police department at that time, they took cameras and took pictures of the police carrying out their duties or supposedly carrying out their duties and harassing people. They took tape recorders. They did all of that back in the 66 and 67. So we did the same thing. We took video recorders at that time, the VCR. We took them out in the community and recorded ourselves taking down these drug dealers and recording them making drug deals, and those were the tools that helped us to dismantle drug dealing in this one community. And if you ever come to Dallas and you go down in that community now, I mean, you'll see townhomes worth $500,000 and schools flourishing and people living in the community. We have community-based organizations now that are down there now who are watching out to make sure that those negative elements don't come back to that community. And so we were very successful in doing that. We put drug dealers out of business in that one area of Dallas. We told those small little mom and pop stores that were operating at that time that they could not allow drug dealers to stand outside their store and sell drugs and do it. We told them that we didn't want them in those stores selling Lucy cigarettes. And Lucy cigarettes, if you understand what they are, it's when one of the store owners open up a pack of cigarettes and he sells each person that comes in there who doesn't have $4 or $5 to buy the cigarettes, he sells you one cigarette for 50 cents or $1. And so my contingency is that's number one, that's unsanitary. It's against the law, number two, and you can't do it. And so we had to threaten a lot of those store owners with closing them, and then we set about working with a couple of African American city council people who were on the city council. One of whom, Miss Diane Ragsdale, was a former member of the Black Panther Party in the '60s and '70s here in Dallas, who had become a city council person in Dallas. We worked with a number of people. We started working with this lie that the media would always tell us, that we hated police, which was one of the biggest lies of all. We worked with African American police officers who would come down in the community and walk those streets with us at times. Um, so we did a number of things in the community that was really profound as an organization, even before we even took on the name of calling ourselves the new Black Panther Party, which took place, I think, about a year or so later in October of 1987. But from that time forward, we started working, we started building chapters not only in Dallas. We built a chapter in Cleveland, Ohio. We started working with other people from around the country who had saw the work that we were doing and wanted to work with us. As we moved into the later '80s, we were still dealing with this whole issue of drug dealers and becoming drug free communities, and making sure that we worked with our city council person in that area to make sure that drug houses or stores that sold alcohol, that they could not be within 1,000 feet of a school. So
Mm.
we did a number of profound things in terms of being able to come to the table, work with our city council people and things of that nature. Because we truly believe, and still do, I still do, and most of our members, or even former members, still believe in community policing. We were the first people in Dallas, I think around the country, to get police officers out of those squad cars and make them walk beats in the community, and also to get them to the bicycle patrols start, kind of had their basis out of Dallas, Texas. We told the police department that if they didn't come out and police our community the way it should be policed, that we were going to have guns out there every day. Brothers and sisters who came out every day with shotguns and rifles to walk those streets and make sure that those drug dealers weren't dealing drugs at that time. And so the police, because we became the police department was getting paid, their officers were getting paid to reduce crime, and we weren't getting paid a dime to do what we were doing. People came out and gave their time and their own personal expense, their own gas, out of the kindness of their heart and the love for the black community. The sad thing is that we our biggest enemies um, at that time so often were the drug dealers. The drug dealers would see us come out to protest them and to make sure they weren't selling drugs, and the drug dealers would call the police on us. So then the police would come down in the community and have a problem with us, and then we just have to stand. We would have
What?
standoffs with the police. Oh yeah, we would have standoffs with the Dallas Police
Wow.
Department. Oh yeah, the drug dealers would call the police on us.
Yeah,
And
just
so
sitting here like, there's not an issue with this here. You guys don't see
yeah, I know, right?
it.
So they were like, "Well, we got a call from somebody in the community to say there are black men and women down here with shotguns and rifles, and we just wanted to take a look for." I said, "Well, get out of the car and come out here and walk with us down the street, and you'll see all of the problems with these drug dealers." And
Yeah,
so a lot of police officers, and there were a few white police officers who said, "Hey, man, you guys are out here doing a good job. You're not out here bothering. You're bothering the drug dealers. We understand that. We know that's where the call came from. We're gone." But then you had some that they were just gonna be complete asses about it and saying, "Well, you can't carry those guns." And I said, "Nope. State of Texas says you can walk around in plain sight, in public view, with a rifle or a shotgun in your hand, and there's nothing that you can do to us that make us get rid of these guns." So sometimes they would go to the store owners and things of that nature and have them to swear out an affidavit against us, saying that they were afraid for their lives with us walking around with the guns, and then try to force us to put up the guns. But we never did fall for that lie, and so then it became these standoffs between the police and us in Dallas, because we were standing up and doing what the law said we could do,
yeah,
is protect our community against any type of outside aggressive forces. And so the police didn't like that because they were getting paid and we weren't.
yeah, man. And one of the things that I picked up on just from hearing you talk right now in the previous podcasts that I'd done with Brother War and a couple others was
Sure.
like the approach. It's a very like calculated, like you guys are putting so much thought into this, and it's not getting showcased because of other narratives that are being pushed. Like
Sure.
especially with the drugs. Like, man, that I was just watching this video about the misconceptions around drugs, and they're it's like two drugs, meth and Adderall,
Hmm.
and it's like they're the same thing.
Hmm.
It's just
Right.
one is associated with a certain type of people, and the other one isn't. And it's
Right.
the same thing with like morphine and heroin, and
Sure.
it's crack and cocaine, and it's like you're starting to see
Right.
the trend, and it's just like uh, something ain't right here, something ain't adding up.
Right. Well, one of the it's interesting you say that. One of the best series that I've ever seen in my life is, and I've told War about this on many occasions. Is there's a program that's out. I think it's a 12-part series. Well, I take that back. It's probably it's a yeah, it's a 12-part series. Each series is about 2 hours, so it's about 22 hours of video and audio program on this series, and it's called America's War on Drugs. And
Mhm.
they start off talking about everything that I've always said about drugs. That drugs were concocted, created, and put in the African American community to destroy us.
Yeah.
And it's documented. I mean, this
Yeah.
the people that put together this series they did one hell of a job putting all of this stuff together, dating back all the way to the end of World War II. I mean, it's just a hell of a series. So you got to look at it if you've never seen it. And so, with that in mind, we've always said that crack cocaine was concocted and created by the CIA and the FBI and dropped in our community. Now we have the proof. Here's one of the things that I think that African Americans in this country need to do, because we have so many people in prison behind this, especially crack cocaine over the last 30 years, is that we need to get together and sue as a people. We need to sue the federal government for bringing drugs into the African American community and then locking people up. That whole notion of three strikes you're out with Bill Clinton in his first term in office in the late 90s. I mean, that whole piece was a debacle. But I mean, it started with all of these other presidents: Nixon, Johnson. Uh, Under the here's an interesting thing: Jimmy Carter probably was one of the best post war presidents, post Vietnam War presidents that we would probably ever have. The others were heavily involved with the covert counterintelligence of bringing the proliferation of drugs into the African American community. And if they were doing it under Carter, Carter didn't wasn't aware of it, like Bush one, like Reagan,
Mm,
Nixon,
yeah.
Ford. I mean, all of these guys were involved with that whole process, and they actually show where they were involved. The people that were under them with the Department of Defense and the U.S. military and the CIA and all of these different people who got their cut of the money. So we've got enough evidence to bring a major lawsuit against the United States government for bringing crack cocaine into the African American community and trying to destroy us. We've got enough evidence of that now. So,
Yeah, and it's, I mean, when you look at there were harsher penalties for crack than there was cocaine,
oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
cocaine was associated with white people, and crack was associated with black people, and it's like, come on now, like this shit gets it's dark, man. Like a lot
Oh,
of it,
yeah.
and just here in California alone, there's thousands of people it's sitting in jail, locked up
Right.
right now that haven't even been found guilty of anything.
Right. Right.
And
Well,
it's ugh,
one one of the things you guys have that we don't, and it's in session, it's been in the last two state sessions. We just started a session for our state house here in Texas, this on January 4th. But one of the things that's out there now is for them to pass a marijuana bill in the state of Texas. And I think as we look at President Biden at this moment, I mean, he's probably going to be poised to move that legislation on the federal level. The interesting thing is that it won't be retroactive. It'll probably start from that point forward. But it should be a retro at least retroactive back 5 years. You got people sitting in prison, federal prison, for marijuana charges, and they shouldn't be sitting in prison for marijuana charges. There was a guy that and I don't really, and I don't care about Trump at all. I don't think his orders, executive orders, things of that nature became an abysmal pronunciation against black people as a whole. But one of the things he did do on his last day in office, he released a guy who had been sitting in prison, I think, for 13 years in the state of Texas. He had been sitting in prison for 13 years on a marijuana charge. It wasn't even crack or, that he was trying to do interstate traffic marijuana or something like that. And, so my point is that this guy's been sitting in a federal prison facility for 13 years on a marijuana charge, and in how many states now? 15 states now that people are legally selling marijuana. And so I think that's one of the shameful pieces of it, is that we got people sitting in prison behind crap like marijuana when there's so many other things that we need to be concerned about. The number one thing that I think a lot of whites, and especially they're having to confront it now,
yeah,
but we've been saying this for 50 years, is the rise of white supremacy in America.
yeah,
And that's a fact. This is they can't say they don't know this now with what happened to the House and the Senate at Capitol Hill
yeah,
on January 6th. You cannot deny that the domestic terrorism by whites involved in white supremacy does not exist.
yeah.
We've been saying it because we've been experiencing it. We've experienced it through police brutality and the murder of black people in this country. We've experienced in white corporations in this country. Because think about it, everybody that went to that rally, Donald Trump's rally on January 6th, wasn't just Bubba sitting out in the middle of the country in some rural area. You had folks from Beverly Hills. It was a couple from Beverly Hills who got arrested for it. So
Yeah,
these folks got money. You
yeah.
had police officers from Texas, Georgia, Virginia, California. I mean, all over the place. So white supremacy has been a part of America since its inception. What white America didn't want to do was confront it, because if you confronted that, then it would have made black folks, who they still saw as inhuman, right. We would have been right about everything we've ever said about racism. So you have to keep ignoring it, keep ignoring it, keep ignoring it, and so it was going to come to a head. It's kind of like slavery. I think if slavery had not ended in 1875, I'm sorry, 1865, when it did, I think you would have had several other revolts in this country,
Mhm.
other Nat Turner revolts, other John Brown revolts against slavery in this country, and it would have been blood war from 1865 all the way to the turn of the century in 1900. So I think a lot of that would have happened anyway, had slavery not legally ended in 1865. But that doesn't mean that slavery is ended for people like myself in war, and for poor and oppressed people, and especially people of color in the United States and around the world, because we are still, people who have to give up for anything we've ever gotten, for that one step forward in America, and or that one there's two steps to break the glass ceiling in America where we get one of us in there. People died. People literally died to get those one and two steps in America. Now, is America the same as it was in 1966? No, it's not. But some of those same institutions of racism are still there.
Mhm.
Those institutions are still there, and I think we have to look at America from the top down if we're going to change people from joining organizations like white supremacy groups and things of that nature. Because you got to remember, the FBI has white supremacists in it. The CIA has white supremacists in it. The NSA has white supremacists in it. Local police departments, which is where all of these problems dealing with Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and all these other individuals who have died over the last 5 years. We could just take a 5 year look back to 2015, I'm sorry, 2016, and see all these black folks who have died, who have no reason to die other than white supremacy still exists within these organizations. And we've got to hit first. We got to hit it fast. We got to hit it quickly. We got to hit it head on, and we got to make sure and when we cut off that hydra's head, because it's not a snake, this is a hydra.
Yeah.
It has multiple heads. So you got to cut that off, whether it's from the top down in these police agencies or from the bottom up. It doesn't really matter. But you got to cut that snake's head off. And I think when police departments don't reflect the makeup of a city, that's part of the problem. We got an all-white police department, and 90% of the people you arresting are black. That make no sense at all. And that could be in whether it's in Texas or any other place. I think those are part and parcels of those problems. I think the gentleman, I think he's either from San Diego, San Jose. He just came to Tech. He just got the police chief's job here in Dallas, Texas. He's from one of those cities, but he's been around the block, and he's seen race relations in California plummet and rise. So I think, by bringing him in, was possibly going to be probably a good thing for Dallas. You needed somebody. Uh, I'm one of those kind of people that I think, having somebody from inside is a good thing, because I think outsiders don't necessarily know what it is that a city needs. So I'm always for promotions from within, because you have more of an accountability status from if you deal with it from you deal with your problems from within first, and then you're able to bring in folks later on. So um, that's pretty much my take on that whole thing.
Yeah. Well, it's like when you have people making laws and policing communities that they don't live in.
Sure.
They don't have best interests in mind. And
Oh,
it's,
right.
and with the marijuana thing, it's like that was deemed an essential service. Like
Right.
that was deemed an essential service, and like in all these states, yet you have so many people sitting in jail that
Right.
are in there for bogus charges in the first place.
Right.
Um, Yeah, it's a crazy disparity for sure. Um,
Right.
man, how do you even? remotely start going about like suing the federal government because that would be the ultimate admission that we've been fucking up for a long time.
Oh yeah, no doubt. But I think we would have to work on that with private attorneys
Oh
as
yeah.
well as folks from the ACLU. I mean, those guys keep a lot of records of civil rights violations by the police departments. They keep a lot of information, collecting information about the federal government in general. I think the ACLU is a perfect place for us to start, and they brought a lot of lawsuits against the federal government on immigration. They brought a lot of lawsuits against the federal government on even on Trump. They brought a lot of lawsuits against him for things that he did during his tenure as president of the United States. And I think we have to start with folks who know what this business is like to sue a federal government. If you think about what Malcolm X was doing, Malcolm X's goal, once he broke away from the Nation of Islam and really started to see people as people, and that in his words was that he saw. Uh, when he went to Mecca and he went all through the Middle East and places like that, he began to see all men as brothers who were in his religious beliefs of Islam. He said, I sat there with men with the bluest of eyes, with the blondest of hair, and we all dipped out of the same bowl and ate together. And so Malcolm had truly come to an impactful point in his life where he began to see all men as brothers and anybody, because before that he had criticized people like Martin Luther King, Reverend Ralph Abernathy. He criticized the civil rights movement in saying that they weren't harsh enough against racism in America. But after he came back from Mecca, he says, I want the people who I have said negative things about for the last 6 to 7 years, since I've been involved with helping my people to become free. He said, I want them to forgive me. He says, because you have to do things your way and I've got to do things my way. He said, but the best thing we could all be doing is work. He said, if you are here for the freedom and of black people, then that's what we all need to be fighting for. When you fight for it on your front, I fight for it on my front, but we are all working together in that scope of freedom. And I think people miss that about Malcolm. I mean, they missed that whole statement that he was really moving towards working with people in the civil rights sphere and making those things happen before he was assassinated in 63. I'm sorry, 64. And so I think that's where we all have to be headed at this juncture in American history. I think even with organizations like the new Black Panther Party, I haven't physically been in the new Black Panther Party. This is 2021. I haven't been in since 2011. So we're talking 20 years. I've been gone
Mm,
from the very organization I created.
mm.
I still work with a lot of people in that sphere. I still work with people like Robert. He and I still, conjugate and working together. We're working on a project right now, as a matter of fact. So I think that we have to move forward away from the rhetoric, away from rhetoric, and really truly talk about how do we move black people forward in 2021 from this point forward. And I think there are a number of things on the table in order for us to do that. Get rid of some of these these crazy ideas that we have about how we need to get to freedom. And I think with that in mind, that's where we all are at this point in the juncture.
What are some of the crazy ideas you're talking about?
Well, I think let me just give you an idea. I'm a personal believer that every every meeting, every protest that I go to, I don't have to bring a gun to it.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? I don't have to bring a gun to every fight that I show up at. And I think what I've seen from a lot of folks who are claiming to be members of the new Black Panther Party over the last 20 years is that everything that they go to is about protests. It's never about and even those protests are not from what I've seen over the last 20 years, people aren't even doing that stuff strategically. They just showing up and yeah, they're just out there. It's not doing it. It has no effect on the system to help destroy systematic racism in this country. And here's another thing: in order for us to dismantle racism in this country, you've got to be in the room when those decisions are being made about your community. And I've seen people move away from the political sphere inside the new Black Panther Party to move towards, a proliferation of guns. And so my contingency is, here's what I've learned. I was in the Marine Corps and Robert was in the Army. If you train for war all the time and you never train those individuals to do anything else, at some point in time you got to give them a war, because
Yep.
they're trained killers now. You've got to give them a war. They got to go to war, or else you've wasted their life of training. It's and I'll say it like this: some people, a couple of people in my family are special operators on the Navy SEAL team, and so I won't tell who they are because they're still active duty. But they're active duty Navy SEALs, and these guys train. I mean, that's all they do is they can be sitting in a room with you and bullets could be flying, and you might be freaking out, and they're like, "No, I know where that bullet came from. It came from over there. I know which way I gotta." I mean, they just calm about it. You see what I'm saying? They just, because they train for war and death all day long. That's all they do. So it doesn't bother them. But they get their war. They go to work for Uncle Sam and they do their business. And that's what they're trained to do, to go in and take out that target or capture that target, whatever their goal is, whatever their commander of that team tells them to do, they go do it. And so, but they've been trained to do that, and they train all day, all night, sometimes, weeks and weeks and weeks just for one operation sometime. So, all I'm saying is that you can't continue to train people for war and not give them a war. They can't have that mindset that, man, I'm walking around here with this gun. I got to use it at some point in time. I think getting away from that mindset is part of the problem with folks, uh, and getting people back to what the Black Panther Party was originally about. They were moving towards a political aim, political means. You had Bobby Seale and Huey and some of those other and uh, Eldridge and some of those other folks who ran for public office in the 60s and 70s. So I think we have to get people back to that type of mind state, that in order for us to rise up as a people, you gotta raise people up who know where you've been, who feel that you haven't had a meal, who know what it's like not to have, and you run those folks for public office. And hopefully, at the end of the day, um, as they move into public office, that they don't forget where they came from.
Mm,
And all too often we've got black people in this country now have more people in public office that look like them, and a lot of these people are just less effective today. I mean, the Congressional Black Caucus hasn't really done a lot to help black people in this country as a whole. And I got friends who are in that group, and they just haven't done enough. As they've held these offices for decades, they just haven't done enough to help the communities that they've come from.
yeah.
I think some of those guys are still waiting for committee assignments. And if they don't get a committee assignment, they keep their mouths shut until they get the committee assignment. I think that's crazy. You go to Congress, you go to the Senate, you go to city council to represent the people who elected you, not to go and make a whole lot of money. Now, here's the other foot to that. I don't care if you make any money, but that shouldn't be your goal. Your
Right.
goal is to represent the people who sent you there. And if you can't do that, then your ass don't need to be in public office. You need to go and get a regular job and make you some money if it's all about the money at the end of the day. But all too often we have people who are not about the freedom and liberation of anyone other than their pocketbook.
Mm, yes. Yeah. Do you think with the how powerful the system is that it can be flushed out with getting the right people in the right office, or do you think it's something that you got to go like a different direction and build something different?
No, Ryan, I'll say it like this. I'm a I'm a tool in the toolbox person. If and I'll explain that. I'm going to give you everything that you need so that you can fix the pipes under my sink. In your training, you're going to get all these tools and you're going to have a box to tote all these tools in. Now, if you don't need a wrench that day and all they need is some Drano, then you just use the Drano and charge them the fee and for the cost. You may not need, for us to tear the pipes under your sink out and go down through the root and all. You may not need that today,
Mhm.
but you may just need, some Drano. But at least if you had to do the job, you got all those tools in the toolbox. That's the kind of person I am. And so I keep everything on the table for people to gain their freedom. I don't think we leave anything off the table.
Okay.
I think we have to do it politically. I think we do it economically.
Yeah.
I think we do it judicially.
Mhm.
I work really, really hard with a group of people here in Dallas, Texas, the last year and a half or so to get an African American who pretty much came up from nothing, who understood what it's like to lose someone in the prison system, and he was a former judge. His name is John Crusoe. He understands, man, and man, yeah, we're locking up African Americans over a marijuana charge, but they're not the majority of people in Dallas County who's smoking marijuana. We shouldn't be locking up people and then not giving them bonds based on, it's like, come on, we gotta do things judicially different. We gotta police different. I remember one of a police chief here that I talked to once, and he said, something, Aaron, we can't lock up enough people. We can't build enough jails fast enough. We got to move away from that 19th century thought of lock them all up just because they did something wrong. We gotta find forgiveness in the system. We gotta get people who have had been on probation or misdemeanors who haven't done anything for 10, 15 years. We gotta give them back their lives so they can move forward with making a life for them and their families. If people can get to the basic understanding of why a lot of these things are going on, then we alleviate poverty in this country by just making a few law changes. And I'll go so far as to say this: we're talking about the state of Texas right now is talking about making marijuana legal in the state of Texas. Well, hell, the state of Texas will benefit with billions of dollars if they legalize marijuana. Just like California, you guys know. I mean, billions of dollars. And here's the funny thing about it: the people that are making all that money cannot even put it into a federal banking institution because it's still
Right.
federally illegal to have drug money in a federal institution. So what do you have? You're hiring private security firms to watch trailers of money that's piled up by the state inside these facilities that they've got, these big warehouses and cable cars piled up full of billions of dollars in state funding that can't go into the federal banking institutions because it's what? Federally illegal to have drug money in a banking institution. So I think if we hit this from the top, if Biden hits this from the top and he legalizes marijuana on a federal level
Mhm.
and the feds get their cut of the money, I mean, I'm not against people. I mean, I just don't see how you criminalize folks who smoking marijuana. They're not the ones out cr- committing these heinous murders. It's folks that are on some of that other stuff that are out committing those heinous murders. And I still think that you don't criminalize a lot of these folks even for that. And then you still give them a path once they clean themselves up, and then you give them a path to almost like a path to citizenship. You give them a path to get their life together after that. And I think that's what we have to really be aimed towards in terms, and that's the real work that I see that needs to be done by organizations like the New Black Panther Party, if they're serious about doing the work. Now, here's the other side to that. There are folks who come into the New Black Panther Party, all they want to do is carry guns. And I remember Bobby Seale and a lot of folks who were in the party. I mean, Geronimo Pratt, G was a real good friend of mine until he passed away. I mean, he and I would hang out when he come to Dallas. We were really good friends. And so it's like, G and I talked about this whole thing. People started coming into the Black Panther Party in the 60s, especially young folks. 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old came into the Black Panther Party because they saw brothers in the community walking around talking shit to the police. And when they saw that, it's like, man, those brothers are down. We got to join the party. But when they got up into the party, they were handed an apron and a spatula, told to go feed those kids because that was part of their role
Yeah.
in the Black Panthers was what? Feed the people. Because
Mhm.
if you feed people, Jesus Christ had the same concept. He said, if you got a brother, he said, those people followed Jesus Christ for hours that day, like 18, 19 hours. And they were like, man, Jesus, you can't just keep having these folks to follow you. They hungry. They got to eat. He said, well, okay, I'll make enough food for everybody so we can all sit down and eat together. Because Jesus understood that poor people can't just keep following you. They can't keep listening to rhetoric without you giving them something at the end of the day to take home with them, some food, some way to some hope, some freedom. You can't just keep following people on rhetoric. You can't get up and call s- you know you can't call everybody who's white racist and a cracker when a lot of those folks really do want to help African Americans to gain their freedom. And I think that's an unfair public dismay from folks who've been inside the organization. I don't think you throw anything away. I think you don't throw away relationships that you could have with people because you want to talk shit and talk rhetoric to people. I think I've long moved past that even before I left the organization. This is us moving to freedom.
Mhm.
And if the freedom train comes along, and it's a whole bunch of white folks on the freedom train, I'm getting on the train with them. I'm not waiting for the all black train to come by. I'm getting on the freedom train with the rest of these folks so we can sit up and talk and figure out how we're gonna finish getting the freedom. Because everybody, especially poor and oppressed people in this country, and everybody that's poor and oppressed are not black, but a large majority of them are. And I think we gain the attention of people uh, uh, when people have to walk in our shoes every day. And Biden said it best. I mean, I look at Biden, and I'm using it as an off reference. Biden understands, I truly believe, what it's like to not have. When you look at his life, and he talks about that. He knows what it's like not to have. He knows what it's like to lose a beloved son, because you can't get treatment, or what it's like to lose a child. You know what it's like to see oppression. You know what it's like because you've either had to walk in that, you've been around it, and so yeah, we take allies wherever we can find them. And so I tell people who are in the new Black Panther Party or trying to be in the new Black Panther Party, move away from conspiracy and let's move towards facts.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? Let's move away from the conspiracy in our community and move towards facts. I had to have this conversation with a few folks about the COVID vaccine, and let me say this up front. I don't care if people take the vaccine or not. I really don't care. But for me, I'm gonna take the vaccine because for me to say that I'm not gonna take a vaccine that was pretty much created by a black woman, the black woman actually created the COVID vaccine. She worked on the RNA repurposing the protein RNA synthesis program that helped create the vaccine. So she was in the forefront of this. So for me to say I'm not going to take the vaccine because I don't trust the government, I get that. I did interviews with people who were part of the Tuskegee syphilis case studies. I talked to families
Wow.
who were part of the Tuskegee syphilis case studies. I think there are probably one or two more of these people, these gentlemen left in America who were part of that Tuskegee syphilis case studies. And if people don't understand this, everything that they know about syphilis and sexually transmitted disease came out of that study against the Tuskegee syphilis case studies. So my point is that I do get it. I know that the federal government has and probably still is in some places using 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 illegal means to test subjects that they have no business. When you look at that America's War on Drugs, we see how they use heroin, we see how they used cocaine on prisoners who happen to be black and white. We saw them use illegal drugs to see how it would affect the minds and bodies of children. They did experiments on children, white and black and Asian in this country illegally from the CIA. So this is not just a black problem of the government abusing its power, whether it's through the FDA, whether it's through the CIA. We have a number of instances where the government has had to come back and apologize and make reparations to people that they have abused with drugs and pretty much gave them in some illegal substance and tried to experiment on them. We've got this. This is all documented. It's not made up. This is not a conspiracy theory,
Yeah.
but we also have to trust those who are truly looking out for us at the end of the day. Um, so, I tell people I'm gonna move with facts and not conspiracies at this point in my life. I don't have time for sitting up thinking about what might happen to me if I take the COVID vaccine. You got to take it, and you take your chance, because you're still taking your chances by being around folks who don't get the shot anyway. That somebody's going to catch it at some point in time. Trust me. I know plenty of folks who catch it, and I've got some people who died from it. They had some underlying conditions and they died. And so I tell folks, when you get a chance and the shot becomes available, go take the shot. If you don't, so be it. But let there be a choice of facts and not conspiracy that will move you in that arena.
I think it's just so people don't know what to believe now because we've had such a
Right.
history of misinformation and just exploiting people. Like like you were saying, like we have case after case of government using people
Hmm.
as their own experiments, and I think that is
Yep.
why
Guinea
we're at
pigs.
a
Yep.
place right now where it's just like you got some people that are like, "Oh, I'm taking the vaccine." You got other people that are like, "Hell no, I don't know what the fuck is in that." And
Right.
that's why it's all over the board. There's
Right.
just yeah, it's
Yeah. I mean, I get it. Trust me, I get it. I know why people do about um, this drug, but I actually talked to a couple of people who were part and parcel of creating the vaccine, and they and it's like, and they look like me. So for me to think that they are trying to destroy me means that I have no confidence. You asked me earlier, what is the point? What do we do to get to where we need to go? Is it one thing? Is it multiple things? I said we have to use everything in the toolbox to get to freedom.
right,
I'm a true believer in that. I don't think it's just one thing that will drive people over the edge to do things that the ordinary person might not do. I think it's going to be a multifaceted amount of things that that do that. I don't wake up in the morning and say, okay, today is my day. I'm gonna start killing police. I don't wake up and think like that. Although I know some people who think like that.
yeah,
It's like, man, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. I'm just gonna take my gun and just go, do what I got to do. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not there yet. I'm not there. I truly believe that I think I can help to make life for other people and humanity better. And that's a part of hope that I think we cannot give up on. I think we have to work together as human beings as a whole. I'm seeing a lot of things, and I'll just use a for instance, climate change. Climate change has really affected the world. I mean, we've gotten to the point where now polar bears are barely able to hold on in the Arctic area. I mean, they can barely find ice to stand up on, or they're falling in the water and they're going to drown. So we're going to lose species because human beings are so greedy that
yeah,
they have to continue to keep drilling for oil and using these gases to shoot into the earth and just destroy the earth over some damn money. I mean, we, that's part of the goal of the Black Panther Party, to watch the environment, to not just talk about using guns, but we need to get out here on this field and talk about how do we help with climate change? How do we get in the boardroom and get folks in these different governments to stand up for climate change, man. I mean, it's one thing to show up with your facts and here are the facts of climate change, and then people are saying, well, that doesn't necessarily. I mean, these are people who just don't want to listen to facts. They don't want to listen to science.
yeah,
They want to have these. these pseudo arguments about, well, facts for you may not be facts for me, and it's like bullshit. Facts are facts. 1 and 1 is 2.
Yeah.
You can't deny that 1 and 1 is 2. Well, no, it could be 1 and 1, could be 0.1.1. It's just the math doesn't add up. And so those are the folks that you just want to slap the shit out of at the end of the day. You just want to you really want to slap the shit out of them. It's just let's let's do what we need to do as human beings. I think that some of us have already figured out that our role in changing the world is a lot bigger than the average person, and that's the role that you must play in. It's a role of leadership, and I keep telling folks, especially folks in the new Black Panther Party, everybody's not a leader in the new Black Panther Party. You're just not. You're not born into it. You don't have the ability. You didn't train in it. You don't have leadership skills. I wouldn't follow some of these folks to the toilet. That's the effect of leadership that they have. I wouldn't follow them to the toilet. So because of that, um, I think we have to have folks who stand up, who stand out and stand up, and those are the folks that you follow at the end of the day, and they make more sense because they're not driven by emotion. I tell everybody everything that I've done in my life, I've never been driven by emotion. Um, I was never going to send my people into the field with weapons and I stand back and talk shit to the police. I was gonna have a weapon too. If they were gonna kill my one of my people, they were gonna have to kill me too. And I always thought that's how you lead. You lead by example. And even Fred Hampton talked about this. He said, he said you can't have an argument about people. You lead by example. And if you don't have an example about how you get to freedom, then you never will get to freedom. Freedom is a visionary thing, and I think you have to catch the vision and hold on to it as it pertains to freedom, because that journey to freedom is a long way, especially for people of color. It's a long way.
Yeah. Aaron, let me speak a little bit on that because I think one of the things that we're suffering from with the current generation that Aaron's talking about has to do with the fact
Sure.
that I would even just look at it like this: when you talk about the pace of technology, the pace of
Hmm.
technology changes basically every 6 months in the consumer market. But what does not happen is the pace in which people mature is not keeping up with the pace of technology.
Yeah.
So what you end up having here
Hmm.
recently is we've had a surge of in terms of technological advancements, but the maturity level of individuals is not matching the same pace of the advancement of technology. So we end up having this whole generation that tends to suffer more so from the lack of the emotional and psychological maturity to handle the technology in which they use.
Yeah.
So as a result of that, we have people that have this instantaneous gratification mentality.
Mhm.
They reach out to Siri or one of these other virtual answers and get their situations from that. So when you talk about addressing problems, when a person just say, "Hey, ask Siri this," and then they go to it and they get an answer, then they mistakenly accept answers for solutions. They think that answers are interchangeable with real solutions. And going back to what Avery was talking about just the strategy that was involved with a lot of the maneuvers that the new Black Panther Party did back in the day, that had to do with calculated planning and critical thinking.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, a lot of the
Hmm.
movements that are going on now, people are driven by their emotional charge
Yes.
to get out and address something, but they're not actually taking the time and looking at things as it applies to coming up with a critical solution to address an actual problem. What they're doing is they're looking at issues as being problems and not looking at the root cause. A lot of that again has to do with the emotional immaturity based on keeping up with the pace of technology. So we have to get our people to take a step back and actually be critical thinkers again. So one of the things that I try to emphasize here in San Diego with the Black Panther Party is that first and foremost, when you go through your training, that you are the first thing you're going to be taught is to be a critical thinker. And from that standpoint, is
Right.
to get our people reaccustomed to doing research, to understanding what it means to address something from a visionary standpoint, understand what it means to actually dig down and get down with what it takes to address things in the long haul. That's why I refer to it as generational advancement. So you're not going to instantaneously solve a problem that's been going on for centuries. And when you have that approach
Right.
to where you feel like you're going to have an answer right away and that you must have an answer right away, this is why you end up with a generation of people who have taken on protests as a way of life versus a step within addressing a problem. Protest
Yep.
is
And
meant to help to draw in people to the movement, and is meant to help draw other things to the table, like Aaron says, as far as going to your toolbox, so that you can have a multifaceted approach to being able to address a multifaceted problem. But unfortunately, because of the mentality, again, dealing with people's emotional immaturity, as pacing it with the technology that they use and with the environment that they use, they have taken on and gravitated toward one methodology as being the whole basis to form their organizational structure. And so, we're dealing with some bigger problems at that point that have to go back and get addressed.
Yeah, yeah.
yep. I
Constantly changing.
mean, I- Einstein said, "I fear the day when the technology overlaps with our humanity.
Yeah,
The world will only have a generation of idiots in it at that time." And Einstein was 100% right. He was actually talking about social media.
mhm,
Even he was visionary enough to see where our technology was headed, and that there will be eventually be some type of technology that people will never have to use their own sensibilities, their own brains. One of the things that we've seen for for at least a decade now is in that study is that young people do not know how to communicate with each other verbally. We see that on a daily basis, but they know how to tell you something on on text messages. They can't even sit in a room and have a basic conversation with each other without looking at their phone, and they become addicted to the phone. But they can't even talk to people. They don't know how to. Those skills are now being lost across the board. And think about it. 99.9% to 100% of the people that stormed the Capitol on January 6th were caught up in QAnon. You notice I didn't even leave room for a much of a 0.01% that maybe somebody that wasn't looking on QAnon. I give you a 0.01%. But these folks were caught up in QAnon, reading message boards. They
uh,
were that shows you the ability to organize using social media, but only as a tool. It's a tool in the toolbox. These people are now going to have psychological problems because Q told them everything to do. They lost their families, they lost children, they lost everything that meant something to them, and now they're lost because Trump is gone.
yeah,
Biden's president. Q is not telling them anything now. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see suicides among those folks now.
that's
I mean,
already
the spaceship came and left them. That's all it was to it. The
yeah,
spaceship left them. It's a Jim Jones Kool-Aid thing. That's really what it is.
yes.
It's the Jim Jones Kool-Aid. They drank it, and then they didn't get a chance to die like the rest of them. And most of them, the ones who went to the Capitol, are going to prison. That's what's going to happen. The ones who drank the Kool-Aid and then storm the Capitol of the Citadel, they go into prison. And that's what people don't really understand is we should not be so caught up in a leader,
Mhm,
in a false leader,
yeah,
a especially an artificial intelligence leader, and we listen to that, and we gonna do with that whatever it is. It could have been an artificial intelligence. We don't know because the person who claims to be Q, we'll never probably know who that is. So my point is, we've got to sit and have conversations with each other and make plans and
yeah,
things like that. Um, so I think human beings now, man, are so controlled on a daily basis. As you read those CIA files, their ultimate goal is to be able to control man with and social their social gatherings, be able to control them through their social media. That was the goal of the CIA Operation MK Ultra.
Ah,
And
yeah.
I don't think people yeah, they people they don't get it, brother. They missed it. And so now we got this whole generation of folks, especially even within the party, who all they can think about is toting guns and think that that means something in terms of their ability to be free, and it does not. Let's just say we were doing it in 1987.
Hmm.
We were doing that in 1987. I mean, that what has it been? 30? Is it almost 30 years? Almost. Wow.
Yeah.
God, I'm old, man. I just it's I was doing this when I was 26, man. I just turned 59. So it's really interesting as I look back those 30 years. I mean, some of the things that have happened,
Yeah.
some of the things we went through. But we were at the table not because we carried guns, but because guns for us were a tool. We used it when we needed to, and when we didn't need to, we didn't use it.
Yeah.
That was a reality for us. I think for the most part, people in the community trusted us outside of the use of carrying a firearm with us. You
Yeah.
know, I live in Texas, man. We love guns here. I got a whole stack of them. When I got stacks of them. It's like I go over to people's house and they give you a beer and a gun, man. Sit down. Let's take a load off, brother. Let's talk, man. So you got everybody. Look here, you know. I always tease people about that, but my sons grew up around seeing me carry guns to protests, and I grew up watching my father go hunting with guns. I mean, it was just a part of my life. But I also grew up out of in a healthy respect of what guns could do.
Mm.
Um,
Yes.
I've run with a lot of different people in my life. I've seen a lot of death, a lot of destruction, and at the end of a business day at 5 o'clock p.m. and we counting the money in the bank and the doors are locked, I still say that our ability to approach humanity from a humanistic standpoint is what's going to save all of us at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's what I'm banking on. If not, then I got two choices. If I don't think that and have some hope that humanity is going to change, I got two choices starting tomorrow morning. One of them is put a gun in my own mouth and take my own life. The other is I'm gonna go out and start doing something to other folks because it's like it's the only choice that's left. I mean, those are the two choices. But I choose on the side of hope. I'm not saying that at some point in time you may not have to use a gun, uh, but I am also saying that I think you have to be smart about things. I think when people decide they're gonna shit on you and not give you that chance to get in the room and make your point, and I think if they kind of blow you off and then at some point in time you got to show them you ain't bullshitting. And
Yeah.
we had to do that a lot of times. We had to do that a lot of times with a lot of different people here. Um, we had to threaten, and I don't know if Robert ever told you this. I mean, we had to threaten the Dallas Independent School District here because they did some shit back in the late '90s. Man, I mean, we go to a school board meeting, and then the white school board members had been meeting with the Dallas Police Department and said that whenever the Panthers show up, we're just gonna arrest the Panthers. We don't care don't care if they sit down at the meeting. We don't care if they stand up at the meeting. We don't care if they say it. We're just gonna arrest their ass. Well, what that led to was something that school district wasn't ready to deal with at the time. Because at that arrest, I got arrested and two of my other guys got arrested. Rob was there, and and they broke one of the guys' arms. They broke his elbow or something like that in this arrest. And so if you were a member of the new Black Panther Party in Dallas at that time, we had an unwritten rule. We didn't write the rule down because we left that rule open because it was about self-defense. And I didn't you weren't gonna catch me writing anything down that might come back to haunt me in court later. But it
Right.
was an unwritten rule that we followed. If people in the system attack us, then we by all means necessary defend ourselves.
Mm,
And so they attacked us that night.
yeah.
So word went out. And I had a meeting with the Dallas Police Department. I had a meeting. I think the FBI was in there, the Dallas Police Department, the school board members, the white school board members who started that shit, and the black school board members were there, and all of the ministers in Dallas, all the black leaders were in the meeting. And I got up in the middle of the meeting and said, I tell you what. And the police said, well, Mr. Michaels, you're the one who made us all come together and hold hands and sing "We Shall Overcome." I said, no, the fuck I did. And I said, I looked at him and I said, you motherfuckers, put your hands on me and my members. And I said, and I told them in the meeting, this is an unwritten rule of the new Black Panther Party. You put your hands on us, we're gonna send you to the cemetery.
Mm,
I said, and it don't matter who the police officer is or what color he is. If they come to the next school board meeting, we bring in our guns. And if anybody, white, black, brown, yellow, red, cat, dog, uh uh it didn't matter to us. If
yeah.
you put your hands on us that night, we were going to kill you. And guess what? We had already knew we were going to die. That was a given.
Wow.
But we were going to send as many people to the cemetery as we could that night, including ourselves. They were going to have to kill us, and we were definitely going to fire back at
Yeah.
them. And so we had unwritten rules, and I think people need to understand that going into this thing is that there were some things that we were not going to change about how we operated. We were not going to change our ability to defend ourselves against any type of racist brutality and attack. And we weren't going to attack anybody, but that's what a panther does. A panther defends its territory. A panther defends its people. A panther defends its cubs. Whatever you were, if you were with us, we were going to defend you. Similar to what happened when we went to Jasper, Texas, when they drugged James Byrd to death. We told the police, we told the FBI, we told the Texas Rangers, we told whoever else was a part of them three-letter agencies that came down there that we were not going to allow the Ku Klux Klan, the neo-Nazi party, or any other of those other groups to march through a black community after they had just murdered a black man. It just wasn't going to happen. We were not going, and those black people in that community were afraid. They were scared to death. We made up our minds that if we had to give our life up to protect them, then we would do that. That's what a panther is supposed to do. Our lives were not our own. We didn't own our lives. The people did. And because we believed it and knew that, then we had, for as far as I was concerned, we had God on our side because God help them if they didn't, if they came down there. We were going to defend that community against any type of racist brutality and attack. We were going to defend us. We were going to defend that community, and we were going to send them all to hell that day. So people knew that about us. I mean, it wasn't something we bullshitted about. That's why you know, taking guns seriously from you leveling a weapon at somebody and ready to fire is serious shit to me.
Yeah.
And so my contingency is that, like I said, a gun is not necessary in every fight you go to. Your intellect might be what you need to do to deal with a person today. Calling out racism where you see it might be the tool that you need. Sometimes using your fists are what might need to be, but it's a tool in the toolbox. And then sometimes just confronting racism and calling it out, is a lot of times is what it's needed. Um, and I think uh, people haven't all too often wanted to call racism for what it is. I think we're now in this time that some people are saying that race matters. But hell, if you've been a black man in this country, anytime in the last 500 years, you've known race matters. I don't want. I've never wanted people to be afraid to defend themselves against those types of racist brutality and attacks. Um, but you gotta do that with this is the last straw. This is the tool in the toolbox, and this is all we got left to use, and you use it. But it's always in an act of self-defense, not in an act of insurrection. It's not in an act of going out and offending someone, or going out to, just because you don't have a job and you want to go out and your family needs food. You don't go out and rob a bank. I mean, I get it, but there are other tools in the toolbox. Let me find you somebody down at the place where you can get boxes of food from right now, so you can take it home to your family. I mean, it's us working together. It's identifying programs that we can do to make people's lives better. That's the hard work. That's the work that nobody wants to do, because we just so quick to call it racist, and then nothing else is to be done. And I think we lose hope a lot of times in just saying that. Oh, man, it's we shouldn't vote because everything gonna stay the same. No, everything is not gonna stay the same if you go out and vote. I mean, think about it. There was about 335 million people in the United States. 335 million people. Half of those folks voted in this last election in November. Only half of the people in the United States voted. So that's about 160 million people that voted. 85 million of those folks voted for Biden. 74 million of those people voted for Trump. You can see that those numbers made a difference in who became the next president. And like I said before, and people can say I'm tooting somebody else's horn. I'm going to give people props where they got props coming. I'm just going to say it. If you do the right thing, I'm not mad against you because you want to do the right thing. I don't care what color you are. I'll stand with you all the way to the hill. You know, we can talk about it at the end of the day. But but it, but I think Biden is reversing some things that have gone on for 4 years in this country. And he's the only president that I've seen in the last 35, 40 years who talked about increasing the minimum wage, giving people a decent, at least a chance at a decent life at some point where they can afford a house. I mean, that's part of the Black Panthers ideology. We want freedom. We want to be able to determine our own destiny. Hell, you can't determine your destiny when you got to work 20 hours a day and sleep 3. You can't determine your destiny like that. You got to make it a decent wage when you go to other people's jobs that you don't own. And I get that. I've worked jobs my whole life, and you still gotta, if whenever you're on that job, you gotta make a decent living so that you don't have to worry about it. You can work 8 hours a day for 40 hours a week, and then you can have time down for your family, so you don't that family's not starving, and you can at least try to do some things for yourself. And I think people miss that whole piece about the whole ideological value of the Black Panther Party. We talk about we want freedom, we want the right to determine the destiny of the Black community, and all too often, because of gentrification in the African American community, other people are now determining what the inner city is going to look like now. We've seen it in California. We've seen it in Oakland, where Kamala Harris is from. This whole thing flipping and changing, and we've seen it in New York, where the inner city is Harlem is now the new Renaissance for white people moving in there and changing the way Harlem is. I mean, in the place that Rob and I grew up. I mean, that whole thing is changing now in Dallas, where all the whites are moving away from the rural areas. They're moving away from the outside the city. They're moving 2 minutes from downtown, 3 minutes from downtown. And where are those places at? Black communities that have been black, for the last 80 or 90 years. And they're moving all those folks who couldn't afford a decent place to live. They're moving them out to the suburbs where they came from. And so now those inner cities are being taken over. I took a group of people on a tour of a place where I kind of grew up, in Dallas, around downtown Dallas, and it used to be nothing but prostitution, drugs, everything you could think of. Now it's like you see white guys jogging and everybody, dogs running after the kids. I mean, you see all of that now. Nothing wrong with that, other than there are hardly any people of color there now. And I think that's part of that. We're not in the boardroom making decisions for these developers when they come through there, because they're not thinking about you when they come through there. They want to make life better for people that look like them. And I think that's part of the problem. We're not, all too often, we're not in the room when people are making these decisions about the regentrification process of the Black community that's been historically or unequivocally Black for the last 100 years. They even moved one of the graveyards here away from where it was to a new location. It's like, what kind of crazy is that? Digging dead black folks up. No, you can't do that in an American Indian community. You can't do that in a Jewish community. Only in black communities do you do that. So
Hmm.
those are some of the things that I think are still profitable for folks who join
Yeah.
the new Black Panther Party today to do. I think we move away from rhetoric and move to the work. Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, all you got is the work. I mean, Huey Newton said it best. Huey Newton said the best thing for me to tell black folks to do when he was alive, Huey said in his book, he said the best thing for black folks to do is pack up their shit and go home to Africa. Here's the reality about that, black folks. We not packing up our shit and going home to Africa. So we gotta eat here, sleep here, live here, and we got to create programs that help us to survive in America. And that's all we've been doing is creating survival programs in America to help us live. I mean, think about it. Everything that the Black Panther Party for self-defense in the 60s and 70s did. We're continuing on with that. But all they are survival programs. They help us to survive in this country. The first sickle cell anemia programs created by the Black Panther Party, breakfast and lunch programs that public schools have now taken on and are now being fed up on by the federal government. Those types of programs, breakfast, lunch, and an early dinner for a child that goes to school all day, which is the lunch and dinner and breakfast that they will not get at home. The Black Panther Party created all of that.
Yeah.
The first free programs for people who were poor, to these urban clinics that you're seeing pop up. All of that came out of the Black Panther Party. And are they getting any props for it? No. But that's something that we have to fight for, the true history, our true role in American society. And I think a lot of us who are historians know it. I mean, but we're gonna have to document more of this, as we move forward, because if not, we don't give our kids something to have hope for. If they think all these programs were created by white people, then that's part of our problems, that we didn't historically, you know you know take that part of our life and our history now. I'm in the process, and I was telling Rob, I'm in the process of finishing up a book on the new Black Panther Party, and how it came to be, how it was created, some of the things that came out of that, some of the negative things, some of the good things, and you just got to tell the truth and tell it all.
Yeah.
And that way, you give people, the generation or the younger generation coming up who read this book, you give them something to think about. Besides, hey man, we get to go join this new organization, man, down the street, and we get to carry guns. I mean, it's not what it's about. It
Yeah.
was never about just the guns. The guns were a tool in the toolbox. It was a defense mechanism. Yeah. So,
Well,
and
for people that are hearing this, that want to get involved, that are hearing this, that they want to get more involved in community and in government and the decisions. They want to be in the boardrooms.
sure.
This is something that's resonating. How do they get involved?
Well, I would say,
um, yeah, go ahead,
let,
Rob. I'm sorry.
let me say, just from San Diego, they could just reach out to us on Facebook, Black Panther Party, San Diego chapter, um, and reach us on social media from there. From there, I usually do my screening, and then I reach out to them, give them my direct number, and pull them in the ranks.
Okay. What about anybody that is wanting to bring uh, a chapter to their city that may not be in?
Well, let me say this. And when Rob and I just had a major meeting with a number of people from around the country this past weekend on Zoom. So there are some things coming that I think people are going to be really, really happy about as we look at the new Black Panther Party, and changing some things that have gone on for the last 20 years, within the organization. If people want to contact me, they can always hit me by email, nbppfounder at gmail.com. That's New Black Panther Party Founder at gmail.com, nbppfounder at gmail.com. They can always hit me up. I'm good at getting back with people if they hit me up by email. I do a lot of I've been doing lately a lot of conference calls with people who joined the new Black Panther Party after I left, and then as of recently, a lot of folks who are trying to get their thing together and trying to establish a chapter. So I've been consulting with a lot of these folks. So um, I think there's probably going to be some good things that will come about over the next few months as we move forward in this country, because there are a lot of things going on. I mean, there's still going to be pockets of racism. They're going to be
Oh,
still going to. That's going to be as long as I'm alive, and there are things that we're going to always have to deal with. There are going to be things um, that I think the new Black Panther Party can do about getting involved. I still truly believe that if we have now documented all of the negative recourse of racism in America, especially the proliferation of drugs in the African American community, and that we were targeted as a race of people. That's called, if I'm not mistaken, I think the Jewish people called it genocide. I think the American Indians called it genocide. I think the Japanese Americans who were interned in World War II called it genocide of a race of people, and they were recompensated. They received reparations. And Malcolm X said it best: you can't just stick the knife in my back all the way to my heart and then pull it out half an inch and say, oh well, I can get it out the rest of the way. Or you can't just pull it out without repairing the damage that this knife has done to my body. You've got to pull it out, get me the medical help that I need, and then we can sit and talk after I'm in the healing process of how you will compensate me for my loss of time and work and everything else that I'm going to lose over this just 2 or 3 months of laying in a hospital. So that was Malcolm's way of saying there needs to be some repair and healing to the African American community. Everybody who has been damaged by America, everybody who has been damaged by America over the last uh, 100 or so years has received recompense for their damage. Black people in this country are the only ones who identify with their blackness have not received any type of reparations from America, and I definitely believe in receiving reparations. And how we get there is going to be another part of that battle. But I do think we start that process by suing the United States government for everything that they've done to us, at least for the last 40 years. I mean, you can start at 40 years and look at that and see,
right.
we could start 30 years ago with the crack epidemic in America and see what happened and well documented cases that the government did bring drugs into our community to destroy us. I mean, I want you to think about this. In 1962, when uh, before Malcolm X's death, we were 18% of the population of the United States. As of 2021, we are now 12.5% of the population of the United
Wow.
States.
Wow.
12.5%. That means that we lost 6.5 million Black folks that we haven't even brought back. We are because women aren't having children in the Black community as much as they used to. We didn't even replace that 6 million that was either in prison wrongfully, died in prison, who are now identifying as being something other than straight heterosexual relationships, where you create children and those children grow. We're not getting any of through death, destruction. 18.5% of the population down to 12.5% of the population now. We lost 6% of our population in almost 60 years. In almost 60 years. And so that will be considered part of that genocide of Black people in America. Yeah, yeah, we just pretty fucked right now. And I think with the one, and think about it, we got over 1 million Black folks locked up in prison, women and men locked up in prison, over 1 million. And like I said, these are people who identify with being Black. I mean, my former wife was on death row in the state of Texas for 17 years, and in 2013 she was the first African American woman executed in the United States in 3 centuries. So
Oh
the
my God.
story's there. Yeah, I mean the story's there. I mean, and so um, we just got to hold that the government, local, state, federal government's feet to the fire in making sure that we receive recompense for the eternal evils that we've received in this country, and we've got to get off our ass as a race and get to work in our community and do outreach into other communities and make sure that this shit never happens again from this point forward. And that means that we've got to not only eradicate racism in the United States, but we've got to move forward and make sure this type of stuff never happens again. You know, that there are generations, you know, that we raise that don't that you know, I don't think anybody will ever not be colorblind, and I don't think the creator meant for us to be colorblind. I think we're supposed to enjoy our differences within each other.
Yeah.
But in that same thing about enjoying difference, we don't let differences stop people from moving forward. We don't let differences stop people from living next door to you. You don't let differences stop people from having the same insurance policy as the ones who everybody else that lives in your community. You don't let differences stop people from getting loans for their businesses. I mean, those are the things that are capitalistically intertwined with racism. It's capitalism, and not capitalism as a whole, but making money by any means necessary is part of the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, maybe we can start with what would be the equivalent of 40 acres and a mule today.
Hey, brother, I'm down. I love 40 acres and two mules, man. I can do something with that. I can do something with that, brother. Hey, you can keep everything else. Give me 40 acres and two mules, and I'm gonna and I'm good because I'll be living next door to somebody who, you know, at least somebody who says, "Hey, man, you got your 40? I got my 40 acres, brother. Let's do this. Grow some stuff." I mean, and that's the other side to it. I think that's part of that mental aspect of it that we don't think about is that people who don't own land, who are only renters, uh, and we don't own the land, and we're having problems even thinking about what it's like to really truly see revolution, because you got to feed yourself. You can't wait for the grocery store to come give you some food if you committing a revolution. You know, land is the basis of revolution. Malcolm said that best. Malcolm said revolution is based on land. And if you don't have any land, you can't commit a revolution. You can't run to the store in the middle of the revolution and get shot. You know, bring it back canned goods. you you got to be ready when the revolution comes. And all too often, none of us we get to yelling at that shit about. I keep telling folks who yell the word Black Power, show me what it means, and they look at me crazy. I'm gonna say they yell Black Power, so show me what it means. You know, show me what this Black Power that you're talking. It's not military power at that point in time. When you get all the other stuff, you have to have a military in order to keep that that you've accumulated. You know, and I think people miss that whole thing. It's not just about the military might, but it's also about culture. It's all also about you know agriculture. It's about everything that makes up a race and a class of people.
It's not an easy fix.
No.
No, that's why you gotta have multiple tools in the toolbox.
There you go.
Yeah, I say at this point it's like getting ready to jump into something that could be a whole nother start of a show. So
Yeah, right,
Well,
right,
we'll
right,
save that for the
right,
next one, man.
right,
But
right.
is there anything else that you guys wanted to touch on before we wrap this one up for today?
Rob,
no, I think Aaron laid out a lot of wealth of information to
Very
chew
much.
off of. So with that, I'm good.
Perfect.
yep.
Well, thank
And
you both.
anytime you guys, yeah, no, anytime you want to do on a specific subject matter,
Yeah,
you can bring Rob and I on, or Rob on, and however you want to do it, and we can always come in here and hit it again, man.
perfect, man. Well, yeah. Again, thank you guys so much for taking out the time to do this.
Thank you,
Um,
thank you.
Spreading the truth. I mean, that's it's got to happen in order for this to change. So
Right.
yeah, thank you for doing this, and hope you enjoyed it, people. We are getting
It's all the people.
Peace.
see you.
Yes, sir.